Hi folks, it's Professor Diffley, Criminal Justice Ethics, Philosophy 220. So we're continuing lecture video 2 here. So take a look at this in the textbook. This scenario, it's actually a real one from Massachusetts out on the Cape. Essentially the story here is trying to solve an unsolved murder. So the police resort to trying to requesting everybody, all the males in town, to submit DNA. They even go further than that, though. It's not only just a request, but they also openly say that anybody who does not submit to this DNA forfeiture, giving over their DNA, that they will be looked on as a suspect, essentially. And so there's many questions. Should this be permissible? Why or not? Why not? Many argue that the request for DNA itself is fine because it's merely a request. But however, then to put a negative view on this is really damaging. This is like when you take the Fifth Amendment and not to testify against yourself. The judge goes out of their way to tell the jury that this should not be perceived as wrongdoing. They are merely exercising their rights. You should put no negative connotation or beliefs onto this or views of it, but we know how humans are. They often do. But here, though, the police are actually saying, we're going to hone in on you as a suspect if you don't do this, hold it against you. That's really the problem here. You can look at the different ethical theories. So this would be a case, like I said, I give an example. I was going to eventually give you some scenarios where I'll give you a scenario, and then you have to apply the ethical theories. So this is a good one here. Formalism here. Formalism could go either way on this. I think the request for DNA in this could be seen as okay. It could be a good rule. We're trying to protect society, that sort of thing. On the other hand, many could argue that this is a bad rule because now we're giving over our DNA. Could implicate us in other things. I know people say if you got nothing to hide. I think which is true to a degree, but I also think those people are somewhat too trusting and naive. If you all you gotta do is read some history, look at what goes on in other places in the world. Those in authority can use it and misuse their authority. Hence this whole course on ethics. And so frame you for it. There's a lot of reasons going back and forth, and that would be part of what you would want to do if you're answering this question: is give the pros and cons on it. Utilitarianism. Again, the problem with utilitarianism here for this is we can only know whether this is good if we know the outcome. So if this catches the criminal, fantastic, then it is good. But if it doesn't, then it's not good. So it's not really that big of a help, but that's how you would apply it. Virtue ethics would ask, is this the mean, right? The golden mean. Are there better ways? Are there more intrusive ways, less intrusive ways? Is this really that golden middle ground? And it's unclear. I think, again, maybe the request would be, but now saying we're going to hold it against you if you refuse and make you a suspect, that is going too far. Like that would push maybe virtue ethics to say this is not. Is this a seizure? Yeah, in many ways it is, because it's sort of you're being almost extorted in this, in the sense that you're being forced into it. So this could also be seen as a seizure. Questioning, interrogation, suspects, Miranda and beyond, and how can this be an assistance there? This offers police objective rules to think through scenarios where legal rules are not clear and do not apply. Miranda, you've seen all this, Fifth Amendment, privilege, of course. Government may use statements whether exculpatory or stemming from interrogation, unless use of procedural safeguards, right? So you gotta, again, self-incrimination. Is not the police officer's job to teach or tell people their rights, that people should know their own rights. You really should. But the police have to know what the limits are of those rights, so how to work and operate within those boundaries. So again, it's the police do not have to tell you what the law is. Like my favorite is always if you watch movies, it says, if there's an undercover cop, they say, you got to tell me if you're a cop or not, right? You have to. No, they don't. It's ridiculous. Imagine a world where that was true. That is, say you're a criminal or something, and the cops are trying to do a sting operation on you, and you ask them, you have to identify yourself as a cop to an undercover officer, and they had to tell you. I mean, that's just absurd. Nothing would ever get done. I mean, I would ask that any criminal or any person with any intelligence would ask that all the time. So, that's, you don't have to tell people their rights, but you do have to work within them as an officer. And again, these are that's what Miranda is many ways about here. As privilege and against self-incrimination, and knowing their rights, and at least in that case, Miranda, you have to tell them that, but beyond that, you don't have to. Again, you got to be warned prior to any question, to remain silent and that sort of thing. This is one of the few cases, exercise these rights. You can knowingly and intelligently waive these rights, but unless and until such warnings and waivers are demonstrated, no evidence obtained, can be allowed. Again, the whole fruit of poisonous tree thing. Where does it? What determines if accused is custodial? If the accused, the defendant, believes that they cannot end the interrogation or leave. Right? The cops comes up to you on the street. You don't have to answer their questions. You can walk away. I mean, there might be, inferences drawn from it, but they can't, unless they're going to arrest you, take you into custody, and they can't stop you from leaving. A lot of people don't understand that, but why? Because when you're confined like that, it's inherently coercive, right? You feel like you have to talk in that case. Inherently coercive there is the fact that, right, your freedom of movement, freedom is restrained in many ways. Post Miranda, you can see, gave police greater latitude in this. So you could read more about this. It is not fun to use his refusal to take a blood alcohol test as evidence of guilt. I know that's in Massachusetts, if you don't take a breathalyzer, that they can keep you overnight and evidence of guilt. That's not true in all states. Like New York, it was when I was at least growing up there and living there. It was if you didn't take the blood test, they could hold you overnight, but they couldn't force you to be tested, and it wasn't evidence of guilt. Places, it depends where you are on that. Some more again. It does strengthen the shield. Edwards does. Once you invoke the right to counsel, they can't just keep talking to you until your counsel comes there, right? Unless you initiate the conversation. Now, what does initiating mean? Willingness to discuss the interrogation. You're the officer. I'm the suspect. I say I want my counsel, and so you have to stop interrogating me. But if we happen to strike up a conversation about sports or something like that, and assume the case is that's not sports related, that's not reopening interrogation. That's just a conversation, right? If I start talking about what you brought me in for, right, on my own volition, like you asked me about, say, I stole a car, and I start talking about this new car or something, anything related to that could be perceived and interpreted as in opening the conversation, initiating the conversation again. So it has to be about what's actually you're being interrogated for. How long in mass must police wait to attempt this? If you refuse to speak, it's usually a significant amount of time, at least 24 hours to see again. They can't just keep asking every 5 minutes. They got to give you some time. After the and you've been released from custody, when can they come at you again? At least 14 days is generally the rule. Must the police let them know in MA that the attorney is offering assistance? Yes. Not all states are that, but if there's an attorney there, they have to let you know that. So, all right, let's get into this now. The police corruption. Again, those parts we just did there are background, and you can see it in the text. And you've taken this in other courses. So now we're going to get into police corruption. The rest of the lecture slides. Again, there's more here than in the textbook, so make sure you look on this. So there are three major forms of police corruptions. There's nonfeasance. This is the failure to perform a legal duty. So this is not doing your job is essentially it. Another form is misfeasance. So nonfeasance, failure to do the legal duty. Misfeasance is failure to perform the legal duty in a proper manner, right? So you did something wrong, a mistaken misfeasance. Malfeasance is complete illegal act, right? So misfeasance could be a mistake without doing it in a proper manner. Malfeasance is illegal. So I'm a cop. One example would be like a shakedown, right? I'm a police officer. I go into a store and I say, "Oh, great shop you have here. It'd be a shame if the whole criminals or something like that start hanging out here. If you do that, if you kick me back some money each week, I'll make sure that nobody's here." That would be malfeasance because it's bribery, it's extortion, and that. Right, you're looking to take a bribe. So again, three major ones: nonfeasance, failure to perform a legal duty; misfeasance, failure to perform a legal duty in a proper manner; malfeasance, a commission of the illegal act. What generally was the definition of corruption? And this is really for any government official. It's the misuse of their authority for personal gain, and that is especially true here in this context for police corruption. Misuse of authority for personal gain consists of illegal acts or omissions by officers in the line of duty, by virtue of their position, receive or intend to receive any gain for themselves or other, and that's important. They don't actually have to have received the benefit. For it to be corruption, right? If I'm trying to get a bribe from you, that's enough. I don't actually have to get the money. You don't actually need to hand me the envelope or the briefcase or whatever with the money. So understand that. Important elements of this definition: illegal acts or omissions. So this is both for the things you do or don't do that you're supposed to do while you're on duty, and you intended to receive a reward or something from them. That is the three major elements of police corruption. So understand the definition, understand the different elements of it. So why are there the police corruption, right? So these are various explanations for it. Some, they're just rotten apples, right? That's the idea. Some people are just bad. We all know this is true in everywhere you go on the planet, in everything you do, any profession. Most people are usually pretty good, and this is true of police. If you've grown up knowing them, friends, family, all that sort of thing, they're mostly good people. But is there bad people out there and jerks and of course there are. Will some police be bad people and corrupt? Of course they will. Why? Because you will find that in every field, everywhere. This is often the way human brain works. Is we remember the bad more than the good. That's probably evolutionary, something built in us to make us avoid these things, but it's the few rotten apples. And so the argument here is that if we got rid of the few rotten apples, it would eliminate police corruption. It's unclear if that's true. We're going to get into that here, but so that's one. They're just bad peoples. It's the few rotten apples. It's not the whole thing. This is the Dowd case in the 90s. Was the argument. Dowd was a police officer, lived on Long Island, worked in New York City, was using his position in narcotics to extort lots of money, even dealing. This is in the cases described in your book. I remember this case from the 90s. This was a big deal of just how deep the corruption had gone, and the argument was he was just a bad person. And it didn't really work that way because it turned out that the officers around him were also corrupt, and that's an interesting case. It's in the sense that what they found is that often when you move, say, one corrupt, oftentimes departments have in the past tried to, not often, but at times, have tried to hide the corruption. And so they'll move the officer, the offending officer, within the department to try to, maybe demote him and that, but not bring too much attention to it. Well, it turns out all the studies have shown you move one person into there, say nobody had been corrupt in that department, this new a new part of the department, the word's escaping me, but they move them to another section. It turns out it can take one of these rotten apples in this sense, but then will also rub off on others for various reasons. So the corruption usually follows them. And they have the influence to get others. So it's unclear that it is always just some bad people. While it is true that there is out there might be more explanations of how that can spread to others as well. And again, this is how this doesn't explain how they become corrupt. It fails to explain why it's so widespread. And so widespread is in the sense of not saying they all are, but it's really just a few people. Then why do we hear about cases of corruption over and over again everywhere you go? Again, not just in the United States, but anywhere. And it again explains fails to explain why there are certain departments that have more corruption than others. And that is true, again, everywhere. There's some, you often hear more about them. There seems to be more issues in certain departments than others. So it's not always the best explanation. It is the one most people want because it just really points to one person. It's easy if we just remove them, we fix the problems. The next two, which we're going to look at, and we'll start those in the next video, would argue, no, there's other issues. I think why people like this one, it seems easiest to fix. We just remove them, we fix everything, whereas the other problems can be systemic and go beyond that. But this is one of the main explanations. All right, we will pick up with number 2 and beyond in the next video. All right, thank you.